There is no such thing as the perfect diet. There is prioritizing certain elements so that you get a better physique, better satiety, better sleep at night, better cortisol levels. That's what you can prioritize based on your needs. But there is no perfect diet, especially based on likes, wants, what your body needs. There isn't. And if anyone's telling you that, they're trying to sell you something or the other.
Right.
But there is no perfect diet.
So we try to kind of all these tests.
I retired, and obviously, but thankfully.
Oof, I am so excited for today. This is a first, and I think I've never heard this title before, but with me in the studio is Natassia Dsouza, who's an emotional eating coach.
Yeah.
I love that, and I'm so happy that I came across your profile and, someone introduced me to you because I think a lot of people struggle with this, emotional eating.
Absolutely.
And as a coach, I just want to start by asking you, what do you do? Like, how do you do that?
So I help women and men that struggle with food, and it's causing them to gain weight. It's impacting their day-to-day life. They need to learn better coping mechanisms, better ways to self-soothe, and I teach them how to do so with elements of cognitive behavioral therapy. And that's what I do in a nutshell.
Wow. Okay, you just said a bunch of words that I'm going to ask about later. But I'm just so curious, like, how do people approach you? Like, how do you know if you're an emotional eater, and how do people approach you?
So that's such a good question because in hindsight, we're all emotional eaters. Every time we celebrate a birthday, a promotion, a graduation, we're all emotional. We're emotionally celebrating something, happiness, excitement, the next chapter in our life. Emotional eating becomes a cause for concern when you're struggling with your weight, when you're you're using it to soothe anger, sadness, stress, and you're like, let me just have a burger. I'm so angry right now. If you're using it as reward or punishment, so you're telling yourself, had such a bad day, or it's been such a long week, let me just order in some pizza, and it's causing you to disrupt your sleep. It's causing you to gain weight. It's causing you to isolate. This is when it becomes a cause for concern. So in hindsight, we're all emotional eaters, but if you can see it going out of track, if you can see yourself excessively wanting to eat and isolate yourself from others, so you're not really struggling with weight, but now you're on the binge eating side of things, that's when someone would come to me and say, okay, this needs addressing in my life.
Okay. And how do people react when you tell them you're an emotional eating coach?
That's a really good one. Usually people, if I'm at an event, people don't want to sit beside me because they're so worried that I'm going to judge what's on their plate from a buffet. And it's quite the opposite. I'm not there to judge. I want to enjoy as well. I like to tune off as well.
Right.
And eating is such a private, passionate thing that happens with food. Some people take their love for food very personally, and they don't want me to invade their space, let's say. So
they're worried that you judge them, basically, which is the opposite of what you're doing. You're trying to help them through this journey.
Exactly, and I don't judge. I don't judge.
So you were saying that a lot of us, or all of us, have the tendency to emotionally eat.
Yeah.
Okay, or indulge in emotional eating. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, a couple of factors come into play here. So environment plays a huge factor. Stress plays a huge factor. Family upbringing plays a huge factor. So based on my upbringing, and say you were born in an upbringing where food was not the topic of discussion, food was not the end-all and be-all, you might look at food very differently than I did. If I was raised in a family where food was everything, dinners were a whole table laid out day in and day out, you maybe came from parents that looked at food in a enormous way as well. That's something that you would develop over time. Stress plays a huge role. Right? And it's very easy for someone, especially women over men, to develop an attachment to food because food is normalized. Eating is normalized. Whereas something such as smoking or alcohol, you don't need those to survive, but you need to eat to survive. So it's very easy for someone to eat something, connect that to a bad day and tell themselves, oh, I feel better now. And so then your brain makes a connection that if I eat that donut after a stressful day, I get these dopamine hits, I feel better. And then we make a connection that that's what I can now rely on going forward. 67% of women struggle with emotional eating more than men. And this has been done in corporate environments because it's just easier for them. They can have it at their desk. We go through so many hormonal imbalances. So yeah, that's unfortunately, that's something that we struggle with.
Right. Okay, so many light bulbs right now went off in my brain because I think it's also a cultural thing, which is part of the upbringing. I know that culturally in my culture, like when a child, is crying, oh, here's a biscuit, and we're so conditioned to find comfort in food.
Absolutely.
No matter what the emotion is,
Absolutely.
like anger, sadness, happiness, whatever it is. And so right now it resonated as you were speaking.
Yeah.
And the second thing that I wanted to mention is it is an addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Food can be an addiction.
Absolutely.
And I want you to elaborate on that as well. How can it get out of control?
Absolutely. So food addiction is something that is really downplayed in our society, as the example that I just gave as far as alcohol and smoking goes, right? We need food to survive. So usually if you tell someone I'm addicted to food or I can't help myself or control myself around food, growing up, because I struggled with weight, a lot of people would come and tell me, well, have some motivation, have some discipline, right? They don't see overeating as a problem or this individual might be struggling. They see it as get some self-control, get a grip of yourself and move on. So it is normalized per se, and people are struggling in silence because of that. They're not able to speak up because of that, because they feel that they lack motivation, they lack discipline. But in reality, when you speak to these individuals that are struggling with food, there's so much more that's happening at the back end. And I always tell people food is not the problem. Food is the solution. Food is the solution to something much, much bigger that's happening. Food is the answer to your stress, your coping mechanisms, to you being a people pleaser, right? So it's always a deeper rooted issue that needs to get tackled, and this is why sometimes it gets ignored because it's normalized. Food, we have to eat to survive.
I actually wanted to know, why did you get into this? Is it a personal journey of your own?
Yeah, so emotional eating for me is very, very personal. I struggled with binge eating for a majority of my life. At my heaviest, I was 145 kilos.
Okay.
And I have been on numerous diets from the age of 8. I was put on my first diet,
Wow.
It being the military diet. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever heard of it or not.
I have.
Yeah.
It has ice cream and
it's
eggs
bananas on one day and then bananas and skim milk on another day. And then it
Right.
ends with a bit of chicken and all sorts of things.
Right.
And so I've struggled with weight ever since I was really young. And for me, emotional eating was it was the aftermath of trauma that I was kind of coping with that no one really had an insight on or the knowledge on. I was raised I'm Indian origin, and for them, it was just just feed her less, just give her less. No one really looked at it as a coping mechanism, which happens to a lot of people as a post-traumatic way of survival. And I took that into my teen years, my adult years, and the weight just kept creeping up. The more people said you don't have motivation, the more people said, you need to eat less, or the more diets I was put on, all that made me do was eat more because now I became a secretive eater. I couldn't eat in front of people because I was seen as this big obese person. So now I would buy large amounts of food and eat at the back of my car, eat before coming home from school, eat before my parents got home. So I became a secretive eater as well. And so it became a very personal journey for me. I did lose the weight the first time around, which was lovely. But I realized I was an emotional eater after I gained the weight back once I lost it.
Right.
Because I think one of the things people don't realize is that they think once they lose the weight, this whole red carpet gets rolled out and their entire life changes, right? But you have to realize why you got addicted to food in the first place, why it was a problem. And that wasn't shown to me the first time around. I just cut out carbs like the doctor told me to do because he told me my health was on the line. And then before you know it, 6 months later, I gained 30 kilos back.
Wow.
So that was kind of my insight into emotional eating and understanding that there was a deeper rooted issue that I needed to deal with. And it opened up the doors. I got trained on eating disorders. I got certified as a nutritionist to understand how people start using food and how it gets addicted into their life. I got trained in cognitive behavioral therapy because I found that that was the only best way for individuals to overcome how they see food, how they see themselves alongside food, and how they can be present in society without being overwhelmed by food.
Right. Okay, I want to start off by saying you look fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Good job with
Thank
everything
you.
you've done so far. And
Thank
you
you.
for spreading that knowledge and helping others, because I think a lot of people still are unaware of the deeply rooted habits that cause these, I don't want to say condition, but like eating disorders and, emotional eating habits and whatnot. And the second thing I wanted to ask was, but then how do you treat it? I mean, I know you mentioned that there are certain, procedures that you go through and processes, but how, practically speaking, as an individual, a common, your average Joe, how would I know how to treat emotional eating?
So it differs from person to person, which is what is so key to understand. Emotional eating, I like to say, goes on a spectrum.
Okay.
Someone could just occasionally emotionally eat by having overeating episodes on the weekend. That could be their trigger point, right? Then on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we have binge eaters who will eat large amounts of food in small periods of time. And we're talking 10,000 calories, 12,000 calories, right? I was on that end of the spectrum, right? Okay. And so first, it's really important to identify where do I stand in all of this. So people, and this is where diets don't fit in, because now you're telling the individual what to do instead of actually meeting the individual where they are, which is my biggest problem with diets. So it's understanding where this individual is. So it could be, Natassia, I overeat on the weekends, or I come home from work and I've had a stressful day, so then I order in, whether it be from the apps or something of that. So it's understanding where your weakest point is, and then seeing how you can now cope better and soothe better without food. It's also good for the individual to understand, if I try, what does it look like when I fail? And failure is something that people are not very comfortable with. And I always tell people from the first day I speak to them, I mention failure so many times because I just want them to get so comfortable with that word, because failure is, you're failing forward, you're learning lessons. So, seeing what happens when you resist saying no to the pizza, saying no to yourself. Because in that failing moment, we can see what emotion that you're trying to deal with and see how we can now self-soothe better. And then it goes hand in hand there. I always tell people as well, if you're dealing with emotional eating and weight loss, we first address emotional eating, and then we move into weight loss. Because the weight loss formula is quite simple. But if you have emotional eating incorporated in there, that's when it starts getting jumbled up.
Is there such a thing as the perfect diet?
Nope, there isn't. There is no such thing as the perfect diet. There is prioritizing certain elements so that you get a better physique, better satiety, better sleep at night, better cortisol levels. That's what you can prioritize based on your needs. But there is no perfect diet.
Is there a way to do that without cutting out, food groups?
Yeah. Such a great question, by the way. That's something that I deal with almost on a daily basis, because I work with menopausal women, perimenopausal women, PCOS, insulin resistance. And this is a question that gets brought up a lot. How do I eat while I'm being asked to restrict? And I'm an emotional eater. And for me, the way I look at things is, if this person is an emotional eater, the risk of her becoming a secretive eater, a binge eater, having periods of overeating because now she's deprived herself. An emotional eater always is looking at food as good or bad. That's good for me, that's bad for me. And the minute we start putting food into these food groups, we then put ourselves in this deprivation, and then we see it. At times, we now lose control around it. So the idea, especially when it comes to insulin resistance, is, the what's put out on social media is cut carbs. That's the biggest thing that's put out, right? But there's tons of studies done that cutting out carbs is only 23% of the problem. There's so many other factors that individuals can do to regulate their insulin. So sleep is such an important one that just goes, sleep is nothing, right? But sleep affects your cortisol levels, it affects your cravings, it affects so much. increasing your protein is another one, right? But it's like, oh, yeah, but, I can see faster results with carbs. But the thing with the faster results that you're seeing is just water depletion from your cells. And so people are not really factoring that in. And the third aspect would be fiber. And so I always tell women that fall into any of these categories, before we go into the best route that people are telling you to go for, your doctor is telling you to go for, because you struggle with emotional eating, let's look at the other aspects. Let's look at your movement, right? Let's do things such as going for a walk right after you eat a meal, because that can help lower, make you better with your insulin as well. So once we do these factors, get you into a bit of a routine and consistency, then we can look at, I wouldn't even say elimination. I don't believe in elimination, but reducing. If you're eating high processed carbs, can we go into things like sweet potato, whole wheat pasta, still have that as part of your life so you don't feel that you're being deprived in any way. The last thing I would ever want someone, especially someone with a family, to be with an us versus them mentality. So my family gets to have the pasta and the meatballs, and I sit here and have to have a garden salad, so that just increases the deprivation, and that's what we absolutely don't want.
Because you mentioned movement, I actually want to tap into that a bit more. What is the ratio between nutrition versus physical movement when it comes to weight loss? Like, what are they equally as important, or is there one that is more important than the other in order to achieve those weight loss results?
The fact of the matter is that you cannot out-train a bad diet.
Okay.
Right? And so for me, it boils down to nutrition.
Right.
It boils down to nutrition. When I first started losing my weight the second time around, even the first time around, I walked into a gym at 145 kilos and everyone there started laughing at me, and so I walked out, and I was so upset because for the first time in my life, I was actually trying to do something. I was actually trying to better myself. And I told myself at that point, I'm just going to walk. I'm just going to walk. My nutrition was on point. So I was eating a lot of protein. I was eating veggies, and even the second time around. But I told myself I would just walk. And it's so, so important because if an individual is struggling with weight, they've never worked out before. They're coming from really stressful jobs, really stressful environments. Now you want to add HIIT workouts, CrossFit, 5-6 days of training into the mix. They're going to develop this all or nothing mentality. Right. If I don't work out 6 days a week and I'm not showing up for a 10K run and doing this, then I might as well not do anything at all.
Right.
So in order for it to be consistent and develop over time, I like to, anchor habits in as the individual grows along and focus on nutrition. And even when it comes to nutrition, focusing on things like flexible dieting, still enjoy that bar of chocolate, still enjoy a piece of cake. But at the same time, 80% of your nutrition, are you getting what your body needs? And then are you giving your body what it wants?
Which is the last 20%.
Exactly.
So I'm just going to play devil's advocate in this situation because this just came up. That initial no, some people would be like, oh, but you're restricting yourself. I mean, where do you draw the line? I mean, because I know it takes some discipline to be able to develop a balance. But still, how would you respond to someone that would say, but that's restricting myself? I mean, how would you argue that?
Absolutely. So it's a great question, by the way. So the no, if you're eating the cookie just to enjoy the cookie, then enjoy it. Mm-hmm. But if you're eating the cookie because your boss said something that you didn't like, then we're going into emotional eating, and that's when you should be questioning yourself better. Right? So big difference there. And so what I tell the individual there is you need to always realize whether it's physical hunger or emotional hunger. Physical hunger just wants to be quenched in a way. It just needs something to survive. It needs nutrition. It can wait. Emotional hunger is very specific. It's very instant. It says, I want that cookie from that bakery down the street and I want 3 of them right now. It needs to be satisfied instantly.
We put out a little, questionnaire to get some of the myths that people believe. And this is the most fun segment. And I love this. I'm looking forward to this, honestly, because I think some of these are funny. So I asked people, some of the myths that they've been told throughout their weight loss journeys. Some of them are true and some of them are myths. So I'm going to ask you to be the myth buster.
Sure.
Just to shoot down any of these myths and explain to the audience why this is a myth.
Yeah.
So the first one is taking a spoon of apple cider will help you lose weight.
Yeah, that's a myth.
Is it really?
It is a myth.
Doesn't it reduce the... I'm arguing because this is
Yeah,
something
no,
that I believe.
I completely... So I've taken apple cider or a shot of apple cider vinegar for years on end.
Yeah.
And what it does is it helps with insulin resistance, right? That's what it actually helps with.
It reduces the spike.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the context that people take it in is that I can have the apple cider vinegar and I can still eat all the cookies and donuts and things of that sort.
Okay.
And I'm going to get the weight loss achieved. So it does help it, but all it does is if you're not maintaining a calorie deficit, if you're not doing what needs to get done in the kitchen, in your meal prepping and planning your day, it's not going to help you lose weight.
Okay.
It's just going to be something really disgusting that you have to take every morning, and it's doing nothing for you.
It's actually doing nothing. Okay, fine. So I'll keep that in mind. You can eat whatever you want as long as you're burning it off in the gym. And I think you did answer that throughout the conversation.
I would say that's a myth as well. That's an absolute. You cannot train a bad diet. That's for sure. What you eat is so important. I'm all about including the items that you love. They're completely fine about that. But you should be having protein. You should be having things that, and it doesn't matter if your protein is cooked. I mean, I don't want to see a plate of grilled chicken and broccoli. I mean, that gets sad over time, right? But if you want to have something, maybe I have a client of mine that loves chicken cacciatore. And she's like, Natassia, I love it. I could have it I was like, have it. It's chicken. You've made it. We know the ingredients that you've put in. So it's just about making it fun and what works for you. So yeah, you cannot train a bad diet. But we don't want restriction as well.
Okay. So ingredients are key, as you mentioned.
Yes.
And I did hear the whole idea of nutrition is like 70%, 70 to 80%, and physical activity is like almost 20 to 25%. Yeah?
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So the next one, supplements can help you lose weight. I'm not sure which supplements they meant, but that's one of the things.
Weight loss supplements, no, that's a myth. If it's supplements such as vitamins and things of that sort,
yes,
they can aid. They can aid because now it balances out your levels as far as iron is concerned. So I'm iron deficient. If I don't take my iron pill 3 days in a row, I'm exhausted. If I'm exhausted, my cortisol levels are higher. I'm not craving high sugary fat foods. I don't want to go to the gym, lack of movement. So it's a cycle that goes out of. So in that way, I would say they do. But weight loss supplements definitely a myth.
So they assist your journey.
They assist. Okay. Exactly. They help balance out those levels so that you're feeling the best version of yourself while you're on this journey. Because let's be honest, it gets tough,
Of course.
Especially when you're in an office and it's someone's birthday and it's someone's graduation and my daughter is selling chocolates for her school.
Yes.
So there's going to be all of that. And if you can show up as the best version of yourself, you'll make better choices.
Fats, healthy fats, don't make you fat.
Healthy fats don't make you fat. Oof, that's a good one.
And what is a healthy fat, actually, if you think about it? I mean...
So a healthy fat are things like olive oil, avocado, nuts. Now, this one's such a well put together question. I'm figuring out how to answer it. Healthy fats don't make you fat, but they're the ones that you need to watch out for, right?
Okay.
And the reason I say that is they're the ones that add up very quickly. So, for example, a tablespoon of olive oil is 120 calories, give or take,
yes,
right?
Yes.
A handful of nuts can go from 200 to 500 calories in a matter of moments.
Right.
Cheese, again, a good fat. So these are the kind of things, they're good for you. They're not going to make you fat. They're actually good for your body during weight loss. It's like the fuel your body needs to keep the weight loss journey going. But they are not satiating because you're not getting a bang for your buck when it comes to calories. So I would say they don't make you fat, but I would watch out for them as far as quantities go.
Right. Because, again, satiety is important.
Exactly.
I mean, if you're having a handful of nuts, you're not going to be full, let's be honest. I mean, you need a full, hearty meal, like a piece of steak, some veggies, something that will sustain until the end of the... Yeah. Okay, cool. Follow the 30-30-30 rule and you'll lose weight guaranteed.
The 30-30-30 rule and you'll lose weight guaranteed, no.
Oh, my goodness. The amount of Instagram reels that I have watched about this 30-30 rule. I can't even begin.
I know. I know. The thing is, you're putting yourself again in that whole all or nothing mentality, right? If I don't follow these 3 directions right here, I'm a failure. And if I miss out because if I miss out because of a commitment that I need to make, the whole day is a waste. So why even bother? So it doesn't allow for adaptability. It doesn't allow for flexibility. What about moms with kids? What about people with family? What about elderly that you have to take care of? And so I would say you have to do a plan, a structure that works for you. There are certain elements of it, movement, food that you can bring in. But no.
No.
Myth.
Okay. Myth, guys. Myth. All right. Sometimes you just need a fad diet to kickstart your journey.
God.
I used to believe this one.
Absolutely. I can't tell you the number of times people reach out to me on social media saying, if you could just give me the perfect diet right now. And then they get so angry because I tell them there's no perfect diet. And then they call me a fraud and we kind of go spiral and spirals out of control. Exactly. But that's an absolute myth. That's what diet culture makes us believe, that, it's just the next best diet that's going to get you those results. And that's not the case. And then the next thing that comes after a diet is, the next best the thing that would motivate you. So no, it's a myth. Again, it's the 80-20 rule, I would say, would be the rule to follow as far as food goes, and really addressing your emotional eating triggers. That would be really big for me as well, if you struggle with food.
Amazing. Okay. You need to count calories to lose weight.
That's true. That's true. That I would say is true. If you are at a point where you are aware of your emotional eating triggers, you know how to self-soothe better, you're truly implementing ways in your life to learn to say no to yourself, opening, I like to call this emotional eating toolbox that people need to look into when they have those urges to overeat or emotionally eat after they've had a satiating meal. Once you've reached that point, then counting calories becomes part of your accountability.
Okay.
It keeps you on track. It allows you to eat your fun food without feeling guilty. It allows you to make room for it, make space for it. Now, sometimes looking at those numbers on an app can be very frustrating for some people or even triggering. I would say then go down to the basics. Pencil and paper and just, write down what you're eating so you hold yourself accountable in some way. What gets tracked gets results. And so if you can hold yourself accountable in some way, will allow you to at least measure and see, okay, I'm performing well. Because it's very easy for us to say, well, it was just a few nuts. It was just a small piece of cheese. But if we don't hold ourselves accountable, we'll never know.
Right. And it's part of building the discipline.
Exactly.
But you are right, though. A lot of people feel overwhelmed, like even writing it down. Like they find the whole process overwhelming. They're like, you know what? Let me just eat, And I think it's, again, goes back to developing that discipline and, that accountability, and being responsible for everything that you put in your mouth, basically. Yeah. Okay. Carbs make you gain weight. Oh, this is a good one. I love this one.
Do carbs make you gain weight? I lost all my weight in the beginning because I cut out carbs, right? Okay. That's how I lost my weight. Way. Yeah. And I gained all of it back. So it is the biggest myth out there that you can imagine. Yes, you will gain weight, but meet me a few weeks later or a couple months later and you will know why it is a myth, because it is so temporary, it's so short-lived. And the minute you put that first fry into your mouth after months of not being on carbs, it doesn't stop. Yes. It is so temporary. And if anything, it exaggerates eating disorders. I've seen people cut out carbs for months on end, for weddings, for certain events and things of that sort. And now they've actually put on double weight or more because of that long period of restriction that they've put them through. So it actually heightens any eating disorders, specifically binge eating, if you do any sort of restriction in that manner. So no, big myth. Yeah.
I agree. And I think it's about how you eat your carbs and how you introduce them into your day.
Absolutely.
So I think I was on a ketogenic diet, a very full-on ketogenic diet. Yeah. I was eating all the fats and the protein in the world. Very, very satiating.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
High satiety all the time. But it was not sustainable. And I think that's what made me gain the weight, because the way I reintroduced carbs into my daily routine was incorrect. And I think that's how you would help people as well, is
Absolutely.
how to incorporate that without it getting out of control.
Absolutely.
Okay, last one. I know I've asked you so many, but this is the last one. The only way you lose weight is through a calorie deficit diet. And a lot of people it's divided. Like people are divided when it comes to this, because some people think, no, that's restricting yourself, and others think, no, that's the right way to go.
Yeah. I would say calorie deficit is key.
Okay.
Calorie deficit is key. Right? It is, again, it's about meeting the individual where they are.
Okay.
You have to ensure. So it also depends on what type of calorie deficit. So I'll give you an example. If I meet an individual, the first thing I'll ask them to do is, I don't ask them for their height and their weight, and I'll put it in a machine and here's your daily intake to lose weight. I will ask them to literally track their calories for a week to see how much are they eating on an average level. So if they're eating about 4,000 calories a day, because sometimes the first time you track, it gets shocking.
Yeah.
And so I'll tell them, you know what, if you've been eating 4,000 calories per day for this past week, let's just drop down to 3,500.
Right.
And they're like, no, but the diets say I need to be at 1,500. And I was like, no. I know what the diets tell you, but you just need to be at 3,500 and you will still lose weight. That's still a 500 calorie deficit, and the weight starts moving. And so what I'm doing there as well, I'm still changing the individual's mindset and relationship with food rather than just going straight to restriction, because that's what everything in diet culture tells them. So I'm still doing a calorie deficit, but it's done in a very different manner. And it helps to build habits along the way, because building habits, following a diet, maintaining a calorie deficit, having your water, getting the sleep, taking your it gets a lot, gets to be a lot.
Yeah.
But if we just do it in small baby steps, it's manageable for the individual. Now they can just tell themselves, 500, that's 2 slices of bread that I don't want to have, or maybe 2 cups of coffee that I can probably replace with almond milk or something of that sort, and then going down in that manner.
I love that. Like just gradually phasing it out rather than having a sudden dip in the number of calories.
Absolutely. It just helps the mindset, especially the lower brain, because what the individual's fighting there is the lower brain. The lower brain is saying, I want, I need. But if you do a 500 calorie deficit, the brain's like, oh, she's still giving me the fun food, and the person still gets results.
Right.
So doing it in that manner works, but that's the way I approach calorie deficit, not in a restriction format, and I think it works for majority as well.
Yeah, love it. Okay, my last question for this lengthy interview is your advice for anyone right now struggling. And I think I need this advice for myself as well, because I think it's been an ongoing struggle. People that have tried for so long, that have, fluctuating weight their whole life, and that are on the cusp of giving up. What's your advice?
First and foremost, my advice is know that you're not alone. Know that there's so many women and men struggling in silence, and they don't want to talk about their weight, or they don't want to talk about their food struggles or their emotional eating struggles. Secondly, seek help if you need it. Right? Seek guidance. There's no reason why you should be in a position to figure this out all on yourself, right? There's no reason you would go to a doctor if something was wrong with you. If you had a wound on your hand, you would get the proper dressing for it. You would get the proper ointment for it, the proper antibiotic. If you're struggling with food, if you're struggling with control, if you're struggling with weekends where it's numerous binges, get the proper help and attention that you need, because sometimes it's just getting a different perspective. Right. If what you were doing was not working, it's time to get a different perspective in. And, sometimes people always go back to that diet that worked for them when they were 14. Like, oh, Natassia, that was the best diet ever. And the one thing I always want to say is let everything in the past go. Because if it worked, if that was the best diet ever, if that was the best period of your life, you would have never gained the weight back. You wouldn't be in this position. So it's time to get a fresh perspective on things, and know that there is a solution. There is a solution, absolute solution. I'm a living, walking example of it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure.